Well, Turkey wants to improve relations with Israel and Egypt, similar to those taken with the UAE. Now, it comes as ties between Turkey and the UAE were strained over regional issues. But Abu Dhabi's Crown Prince Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed's visit to Ankara last week elevated relations as the country sealed multi-billion-dollar investments. Well, President Erdogan even suggesting that Turkish ambassadors could be sent back to Egypt. And our senior correspondent Owen Alterman joins us here in studio. Good evening, Owen. We've seen these recent strained relations, of course, with Turkey, with this pair photographing Erdogan's palace there. Why is it all of a sudden that Turkey now wants to reconcile?
Yeah, Sarah, maybe partly as an outgrowth of that episode. Again, that couple had been held in Turkish prison before, of course, thankfully being freed and brought back to Israel. It seems to have been a bit of a coincidence that happened, not any kind of plan by the Turks to have any kind of incident that would hurt their relations with Israel. But what seems to have come out of it, or at least this is the spin being given by a lot of Israeli officials, is that the nature of the relationships that were either used or formed as part of solving that crisis could be used as a basis for trying to improve relations between the two countries. But as you hinted, in terms of the Turkish story with the UAE, there are obviously much bigger forces at play. The Turkish economy, of course, is in big trouble.
Yeah.
The Turkish currency in even bigger trouble. And so the Turks may see fit to be able to try to reach out to countries around the region and to not have so many rivals, not have so many enemies, not have so much animosities. But go back to that original Erdogan idea of zero problems with neighbors way back when he came to be Turkey's leader.
Yeah, well, they weren't sticking to that a few weeks ago. And tell me, Owen, could this be a strategic sort of, let's call it, clever move there by Tayyip Erdogan following this deal between Jordan and Israel?
Yeah, well, listen, that demonstrates, again, how much, Sarah, the Abraham Accords have reshuffled the deck in the Middle East and given the UAE an opportunity, right, to build their leadership on the environment and on green issues, and also to be seen as bringing these countries together, which only improves, increases, and helps their brand abroad and increases their soft power. But the question of whether this is a strategy begs the question about whether Erdogan can actually have a strategy and stick to it. We've seen so many zigs and zags in terms of his policy towards Israel and his relationship toward Israel and his rhetoric toward Israel that I don't think that there is anyone in this country, Sarah, who could really feel confident that even if the relations improve, the Turkish ambassador lands and starts to serve here in Tel Aviv, that's really something that has staying power, because Erdogan has proved over the course of his long tenure in Turkey to be erratic, to be inconsistent, and someone who can't really be trusted for the long term. And regardless of what decision is made over the next few days, over the next few weeks, it's not likely to change that.
So who would sort of, take the lion's share of the benefits, if these relations are sort of brought back from the brink? Who would benefit the most here, Owen?
Israel would. Look, the Turkish economy is much bigger than ours, Sarah. They are overall a much bigger and more powerful country than Israel is, albeit, of course, given Israel's military power and its alliance with the United States, we have plenty of cards to play. But Turkey is a big fish in the Middle East. Israel is after any fish in the Middle East, big or small, to form relations with. So whenever there is an improved set of relations between Israel and a country in the Middle East, it's a very, very big deal for people here. At the end of the day, Turkey is much more enticing for Israel than vice versa, something that we saw play out over the beginning of the last decade, right? Israel very reluctant to cut those ties. We see remnants of it now, even with the reluctance of the Israeli government to recognize the Armenian genocide. So again, we still see that. But certainly Israel can be useful for Turkey for a number of reasons. Help Turkey's standing in Washington. And again, help lower the flames of rivalry and conflict for Turkey in the Middle East when the current season's free.
I like the way you're putting it there, Owen. And Israel used to carry out military drills there in Turkey. That really goes to show that there was this cooperation. Will it ever come back to what it was? Can they regain this relationship?
Under Erdogan, Sarah, I don't think so, because again, I don't think that people here, from the public to policymakers, are going to really be able to trust him to follow through with some kind of reconciliation with Israel over the long term, because for all that we've talked about, of all the incentives he has to become closer to Israel, it's very enticing for him. On the other hand, right, he may see opportunities to build Turkey's image in parts of the Arab world by being hostile to Israel, as we've seen him do so often over the course of the past decade. So it's going to be hard, I think, for people here to trust him. In the day after Erdogan, when there's a different leadership in Turkey, I think it's a very, very different story. Certainly there will be elements of Turkish public opinion whose attitudes toward Israel will have been formed over the course of the Erdogan era, but I do think on the day after, it might be possible to truly turn a new page. We have 500 years of very positive history between Jews and Turks, going back to those Jews welcomed by the Ottoman Empire after they were kicked out of Spain and Portugal. So there's a lot to rest on. And of course, Turkey, again, Israel's second most important ally. If you go and look at what happened in the 1990s, there is a history there. I don't think it can really be recaptured under Recep Tayyip Erdogan, but on the day after, I think there's a chance.
So we've got about 45 seconds left with you, Owen. What do you see happening then in the next few weeks, months, and even years?
Look, Erdogan, Sarah, has been very clear in telegraphing that this is his current direction. This is the flavor of the month of his foreign policy. As long as there's not a security escalation here or some other incident like that, I think at least in the immediate term, it sounds like Erdogan is interested in warming relations. But again, what that means over the medium or long term is a huge question mark. Again, I don't think Erdogan can really be trusted to stick with that. I think all Israeli policymakers understand that full well. So they're going to continue to build strong relationships with Greece and with Cyprus and not to put too many eggs in the Turkish basket.